looks like you giving everything to God. But it's the place where God actually sees you cross the line and he says, this I can bless. Surrender. I wasn't planning on saying all this. God just wants to speak. Surrender looks like you getting on the altar. In the Old Testament, there's a picture I want to paint for you so that you start to understand what I'm trying to say here. Because the Bible tells us to present ourselves as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. What that means is that God won't accept you any other way. Do you understand this? God won't accept you any other way other than a living sacrifice. Do you get this? Now, he accepts us just as you are. I'm not talking about the fact of, oh, well, I came to Jesus and I gave him my life. But if you really want to mean business with God, God's not going to take you halfway lukewarm. He's only going to take you as a living sacrifice. This is what a living sacrifice looks like. The altar in the Old Testament, it was made out of 12 massive stones. I didn't realize till several years back that on the four corners of that altar was I think it was a brass horn, like a cow's horn. It was a brass horn on the corner of each of the corners of the four points of the altar. And when they would bring living sacrifices before the Lord, let's just say like a lamb, they would tie each of the legs to those horns. So the animal was literally laying on the altar, bound down. Now, symbolically, the horn, which is also referred to as the horn of oil that the prophets would take, speaks of the anointing and power. And you have to bind yourself to the power of God. When God is asking you to become a living sacrifice, he is asking you to yield yourself where you no longer have control because you have bound yourself. That's why Paul called himself a bond servant. He crossed the line. He gave all. He can't see. Giving all looks like, and surrendering looks like, you giving to God what you cannot take back. It doesn't look like you saying something on Sunday and doing something different on Tuesday. You give all, and it's done. And that's the place where God says, this here, I can accept this. This is pleasing to me. This is holy and acceptable, and I'm going to answer this with fire. And it's at that point there is a shift and things begin to change. What does this look like? This looks like you losing control. So that's why it's the most scary thing I could talk about tonight, because this is a place of orphans. This territory is full of orphans, and we've all been touched by it in some way, and we've been hurt in one way or the other, and so we've vowed to have control. It's hard, isn't it? It's hard when God says, I want you to surrender to me, because you see, some of us is like, well, what if I never get a husband, or what if I never get a wife, or what if I never come into that thing, or what if that one dream never comes into play? Listen, if it's fear, it's the devil. If it's fear, it is the devil literally trying to scare you out of covenanting with the greatest being in the universe that has told us that he's no man's debtor. You can't outgive God, which means you can't give God the control of your life and not have him honor you in return. So the thing that you think that in your ability that you can attain for yourself is a dwarfed molehill in comparison to what God actually has in store for your life. The problem is that we're down on the molehill level, looking at the molehill saying, this is everything. I can't get past this molehill. And God's like, I've got this big Mount Everest over here, pile of goodness and blessing that you can't see because you're standing on such a funky angle that the molehill is shadowing out Mount Everest. And you're not looking at it with the right perspective. Surrender gets you over the molehill. Well, I need to do this, and I need to make this kind of money, and I need to travel here, and I need to, I promised myself when I was young that I was going to do a year of traveling. Well, maybe your promise just got in the way of God's plans. Maybe you need to surrender that. I'm not saying you just go give it up randomly. I'm just saying maybe you need to go to God and ask him if it's something that's in the way. Because his problem is that we've made plans. We make plans, and most of the time we mess up if we haven't had the counsel and input of God. Is this okay? I know you guys were really hoping I was coming back to give you an encouraging message. I know some of you were asking God, God, please, when he comes back, please, God. This is an encouraging message. This connects you with the blessing of heaven. And it actually disconnects you with the very things that you think are comforting, but they're the very things that are tormenting you. It's like having parasitic organisms in your intestinal tract and saying, well, this is all I've ever known. They're a part of me. Just let that sink in for a second, because that's exactly what it looks like in the spirit realm. Fear is a parasitic organism that has nothing to do with your destiny. Nothing to do with it. It's trying to pull you into an alternate reality. It's real simple. I give you everything.